Every city has a story, but few cities have a story quite like this one. Paris, capital of France, cradle of revolution, birthplace of ideas that changed the world. This is not just a city. It is a monument to more than 2,000 years of human ambition, conflict, beauty, and resilience. Long before the cafes and the cathedrals, before the revolutions and the boulevards, there was the river, the Seine, a highway of water running through the heart of what would one day become the most celebrated city on Earth. The oldest evidence of human presence here dates to around 8000 BC. Hunters and gatherers who camped along its marshy banks. By the time iron was being forged and traded across Europe, a Celtic tribe known as the Parisii had claimed this stretch of the Seine as their own. Between 250 and 225 BC, the Parisii built an oppidum, a fortified settlement, most likely on the Ile de la Cité, the small island at the river's heart. They bridged the Seine, controlled the crossing fees, and minted their own gold coin. Trade flowed through them from Britain to the Mediterranean. They were prosperous, they were strategic, and they were noticed. In 52 BC, Julius Caesar's Roman army swept through Gaul. The Parisii fought bravely under their commander Camulogane, but they were no match for Rome's disciplined legion. The Battle of Lutetia was decisive. The Parisii were defeated, and a new Gallo-Roman garrison town rose from the ashes of their settlement. They called it Lutetia. Lutetia was a proper Roman city, laid out along a north-south axis on the higher left bank of the Seine. It had a forum, a basilica, an amphitheater capable of seating up to 15,000 spectators, and public baths fed by an aqueduct 16 kilometers long. Roman wine, olive oil, and imported sauces arrived in amphorae from Italy. The swampy Celtic outpost had become a civilized urban center. In the 3rd century AD, a man named Denis became the first bishop of Paris. He was martyred on the hill that would one day bear a name derived from his memory, Montmartre, the Hill of Martyrs. His death planted the seeds of a faith that would define this city for over 1,000 years. In 508 AD, a Frankish king named Clovis I made Paris the capital of his empire. The city had a new name, taken from the tribe that had first called it home. By the time the Capetian dynasty rose to power in 987, Paris was already the most important city in France. In 1163, construction began on Notre-Dame Cathedral, a soaring monument to Gothic architecture that would take nearly 2 centuries to complete. Around the same time, the University of Paris was founded, drawing scholars from across the continent. The city was becoming not just a center of power, but a center of thought. Trade made Paris rich. Pilgrims and merchants moved through its streets in great numbers. Silver changed hands. Ideas were exchanged. But medieval Paris was also a city of suffering. In 1328, it was the most populated city in Europe. And then the bubonic plague arrived. Thousands of Parisians died. The 100 Years' War with England brought further devastation. The city was occupied by Burgundians and English forces between 1418 and 1436. In 1431, Henry VI of England was crowned King of France in Paris. Even Joan of Arc could not dislodge the English from the capital. It would not be until 1436 that Paris was finally restored to French hands. For much of the 15th and 16th centuries, the French monarchs preferred the Loire Valley to the crowded streets of Paris. Then, in 1528, King Francis I returned the royal residence to Paris, and the city once again became the engine of France. It also became the book publishing capital of Europe. On the 24th of August, 1572, Paris witnessed one of the most horrific events in its long history. The Royal Council ordered the assassination of Protestant leaders. What followed was far worse than any planned execution. Catholic mobs poured into the streets. For days, Protestants, known as Huguenots, were hunted and slaughtered. The violence spread from Paris to the rest of France. It became known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. The wars of religion continued for decades. In 1588, Catholic extremists forced Henry III to flee Paris on what became known as the Day of the Barricades. He was assassinated the following year. His successor, Henry IV, converted from Protestantism to Catholicism and was crowned King of France in 1594. In 1648, Parisians rose again, this time against the poverty and heavy taxation that gripped the city. This was the beginning of the Fronde, a series of civil wars that tore France apart for over a decade. When it was finally over, King Louis XIV moved his court to the Palace of Versailles in 1682. In the 18th century, Paris became the intellectual capital of the world. In its salons and coffee houses, philosophers debated the nature of power, freedom, and human reason. Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, Montesquieu, their ideas spread outward from Paris, shaping a world ready to change. They called this movement the Enlightenment. By 1789, those ideas had become a fire. France was bankrupt. The people were hungry. On the 14th of July, 1789, the people of Paris stormed the Bastille, the great prison fortress that symbolized royal authority. It was the opening act of the French Revolution. Within 2 years, France had its first written constitution. Within 3, the monarchy had been abolished and a republic declared. On the 9th of November 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in a coup that ended the Revolutionary Directory and installed him as first consul. He would go on to become Emperor of France. He built arches to commemorate his victories, created the Paris Bourse, expanded the Place du Carrousel, and constructed new markets and public spaces across the capital. On the 20th of November, 1815, following his defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon's empire ended. The Second Treaty of Paris was signed. The emperor went into exile. After Napoleon, France passed through decades of political instability. In 1851, Napoleon's nephew seized power and became Emperor Napoleon III. Working alongside his prefect of Paris, Baron Georges Eugène Haussmann, Napoleon III launched the most radical transformation of a city in modern history. Between 1853 and 1870, medieval Paris was demolished and rebuilt. Narrow streets gave way to wide boulevards lined with uniform stone facades. New parks, squares, and sewers transformed the city. The ancient fortifications came down. Paris expanded to its current boundaries in 1860. In 1871, after Paris endured a devastating siege by Prussian troops, the Third Republic was proclaimed. In 1889, to mark the centenary of the Revolution, Paris unveiled the Eiffel Tower. Designed by Gustave Eiffel, it soared over the city at 300 meters, the tallest man-made structure on Earth. In 1900, Paris opened its first metro line. Millions of tourists arrived for the great international expositions. The city stood as the undisputed capital of art, fashion, and ideas. World War I brought bombardment to the city's outskirts. Paris held. Between the wars, it became a magnet for artists, writers, and thinkers from around the world. The city reached its peak population of 2.1 million in 1921. On the 14th of June, 1940, Nazi Germany occupied Paris. For 4 years, Parisians lived under occupation. Collaborators assisted the occupiers, but networks of ordinary citizens, the resistance, fought back in the shadows. Liberation came on the 25th of August, 1944. Allied forces, including the French 2nd Armored Division, rolled into Paris. General Charles de Gaulle marched down the Champs-Élysées before crowds overcome with joy. Paris was free. Post-war Paris rebuilt itself with energy. New neighborhoods rose, new institutions opened, and then, in the spring of 1968, the city erupted. Students took to the streets. Workers joined them. May 1968 became the largest student uprising in the history of France. The protests transformed education, labor rights, and cultural life across the country. The Centre Pompidou opened in 1977. The Louvre Pyramid arrived in 1989. Paris continued adding museums, concert halls, and public parks to its already unmatched cultural landscape. On the 13th of November 2015, three coordinated terrorist attacks struck Paris simultaneously. Cafes were targeted, bombs were detonated near the Stade de France. At the Bataclan Concert Hall, 89 people were murdered. In total, 130 lives were lost and more than 350 wounded. It was the deadliest terrorist attack in French history. On the 15th of April, 2019, the roof of Notre-Dame Cathedral, standing for over 850 years, caught fire. The central spire collapsed. In late 2024, Notre-Dame reopened its doors, restored and standing once again above the Seine. From a Celtic settlement on a marshy river island to one of the most visited and influential cities on earth, Paris has never stood still. It has been conquered and liberated, torn down and rebuilt, humbled and glorified. It has been the city of kings and the city of revolution, the city of art and the city of grief. Paris has always been the city of ideas, a place where the great questions of how we should live, govern, and create have echoed through the centuries. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, share, and comment on the video. For more such videos, subscribe to our channel. Until then, keep watching.